Michelle. How are you doing?
Oh, better than last week.
Yeah, so the hard part is over, right?
Yeah. All those fevers and
Chills,
chills. Yeah.
body aches. Yeah, that's the common thing. So now you're vaccinated. You can go places now.
No, no. I'm still afraid of the variants.
Well, yeah, you're gonna get. Well, I know that for our CCD, the school, we had a discussion last week about scheduling for the fall, and they mentioned that they haven't gotten any words about requiring all students and staff and faculty to get vaccinated. They encourage people to do it. So until they get the requirement from CDC, then they will apply it. But yeah, so you just gotta be careful still with washing hands, wearing mask. Um, but yeah, I got the same thing. It wiped me out for like 3 days. So
Oh
I'm
my.
glad you bounced back.
Uh, I still have a lingering head thing though. I don't know.
Headaches?
No, it's just my head feels kind of funny. Not. It's not like a headache, but there's still like it feels weird still.
Yeah, what helped me was I took Advil and or ibuprofen, and that helped me because I first couple of days I didn't want it to do it. I wanted to just write it out, but it was rough.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I ended up taking it like after this. Yeah, the second day I was like, I gotta take something.
Yeah. So I think you might want to boost up on vitamins. That's going to help, and just drink fluid. It'll go away in like a day or two. Hi, everyone. How are you? Doing okay?
Yeah, I should mention that no one. I recommend no one get their second dose the week before finals or the week of finals,
Yeah.
just in
So
case.
that's true. You guys heard that? Michelle recommends that don't take the second shot during the finals because it's going to wipe you out. So, and if you take it on the weekend, you can rest a little bit more than worrying about assignments and things. So, okay. I got some emails regarding your account access. So just to clarify everything, if you're using the RCCD account, because RCCD use Azure, and they also use AWS, if you use that, you might not have the highest privilege. And when I created the account, I looked back, and for Azure, it took a little bit of time for them to apply the subscription. So if you still having issues, we can address that later on today. And so this is going to be our last lecture session. You will not have a lab this week. I will be on Zoom in case you have questions. You can pop in, and you're always welcome to see me during office hours as well. So, or if you don't want to, if you don't have time, you can send email. We can also set up appointments if needed. I posted the project. I went back and forth thinking about how we can encapsulate everything that we have learned into project. And the most efficient way to do it is to use cloud. You have options in the AWS. So let's start with that, and then we'll go into the lecture and the assignments, and then we'll wrap up the course. There are two additional chapters or sections in the book that goes over additional tools. You're welcome to cover that if you have the textbook. Um, and so yeah, I did the same thing. Seth put in that you have to sign up with the Azure. So he mentioned that with signing up, um, with the student account, you get $100 credit, but if you do the regular account, you get $200 credit. So I use the $200 credit, the free regular Azure account. Um, Okay. And then Seth mentioned that there is no credit card required for the student one. So let me copy and paste his link in case you're still working on the Azure lab. Okay. Also, just to remind everyone that if you have outstanding work or anything that you need to submit, make sure that you get those to me by June, before June 6th, so I can update your grade going into the final. I usually don't take anything during the final week for late assignments. I will only accept projects and final review, and usually final review needs to be done before then, and then we are going to take the final exam. In the next few weeks, I'm going to start covering final review. I will post that next week, and then I will use the lecture portion, which is Monday, to cover our final review. I'd like for you to attend so we can go over the questions and we can talk about, if you have any concern or questions regarding the final exam. It will be through Canvas, multiple choice, with lockdown browser. So you will be able to, very similar to the quiz, it's just going to cover all the chapters because we don't really have the third quiz where it covers the last part. So there will be the last part where we had talked about AWS, Azure, and also we're going to talk about ELK today. Okay. Any questions regarding our plan for the next few weeks? Okay, and I apologize for posting the project late. I tried to really find a solution that will work for you as we are conducting session virtually. So let's talk about our project first. Let me get into share screen. And so as you look at the module, if you go to the bottom, you would find the course project, and that's due on the 9th. You're welcome to submit that before. I will not start grading the project until um, the week of finals. So make sure that we look at the project information and work on our project. I divided up into two parts. So if you click the first page, it's going to give you the requirement information. There's a document that's included. Um, so this project is going to cover the concepts that we address in this course. Unfortunately, I'm not able to incorporate some of the stuff with your appliances with Cisco routers and Jupyter and all of the appliances because we just simply don't have the physical appliance to test as we are doing virtual classes. So I try to make it where you will not spend too much time trying to configure the network, as AWS and Azure platform already have that set up, but we are going to use the virtual machines. So this project is divided into two parts. And when you look at the requirements, it talks about part one, where we are going to use cloud platform to automate the processes in the networking part. So you can, as you already have AWS and Azure, you can choose either of the product. I'm fine with you picking one or the other. You don't have to pick specific because realistically, in our organizations, you will have companies that would go with one or the other, or sometimes both in the case of RCCD, as they accommodate a variety of different legacy applications and things. So they might choose both, but having a knowledge in each area is going to help you. So you are going to make two virtual machines. We already learned how to automate the provisioning of that. You can use the script as what we talked about last week, using Azure to provision your virtual machines, or you can manually make it in your portals. So you can go into the Azure portal or the AWS portal, and you can start your instance. So you should use two Linux virtual machines, and I highly recommend using Ubuntu, um, because it's easier to work with. You will find documentations and to be able to really navigate, and then we have practice in Ubuntu, so you would know how to, Vim and use some of the tools in Ubuntu. Now, if you opt to use Red Hat or other versions of Linux that's given to you by AWS or Azure, just keep in mind that the commands and the structure is a little bit different on how you would use the terminal. And so it really depends on, your choice. Okay. So instead of making our own virtual machines, I prefer that you would use the instances that are available to you, and that way you can control them and delete them, and and it will not take up a lot of your storage on your computer or on your external hard drive. So on one of the virtual machine, you are required to make it a controller virtual machine. And this is where we would write our script. This is where we would store. And keep in mind that when you're doing this, you need to think about where you put those files and how you use those files and the modules or the packages to be able to be applied with those files. Um, so I would encourage you to use a virtual environment within a virtual environment, meaning that you're using a virtual machine on the cloud, which is stored on AWS or Microsoft storage. However, when you use Python environment, make sure that it is organized in a directory. So that's very important to keep in mind. And also to use the virtual environment, activate that. And then so that way you can keep your scripts and everything together with a certain package. Okay. And we did that since day one. We did it for various labs. So you can go back and take a look at how you've done those labs. Um, so having the setup, and what I like for you to do in your cloud environment is I need to see it. So if you can create a user account and give me access to your virtual machine, so that way I can actually test and see how you tested your script. And so when you send in the project information, I like for you to include the user account and its role, and make sure that you can give me administrative privilege to your virtual machine. You don't have to give me administrative privilege to your entire cloud. I showed you how you can create the user account and tie it to your virtual networks. So you can allow me to be able to see your virtual machine and run the scripts on your virtual machines, and then be able to test it. Okay. So I need for you to provide your user account access information. You can copy and paste that um, into your a document if you want. If you have downloaded specific key files, make sure that you provide that. Usually it would allow you to have like private key files for a certain account, especially with AWS. And if you're using a certain password or passphrase for those accounts instead of auto generated and reset, then make sure that you provide that. So be detail specific in the user access, because if I can't access it, then I cannot test your virtual machines and your scripts. Okay. Now, another way that I can go about doing it is to test it with my own, but however, your script will work to your custom virtual machine information. So I prefer that to test it on yours after you submit it. Okay. So don't disable it or take it down right away. Give me, a few days to be able to do that, and then you can turn it off. As I understand that it would subtract a few dollars in your credit, so I wanted to make sure that we can have that set up for our final project. Okay, any questions with 1A? Okay, so you need to have a controller and you need to have a client virtual machine. And the client is the destination where you would be able to test your script and then the controller is where you would launch your script. So we want to launch our script for automation on the controller virtual machine. And I see a chat question. So I suggest maybe on the day, if let's say you submit it on the 9th of June, give me a few days. So give me until the end of Sunday. Okay. Um, I just want to make sure Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So like 3, 4 days. So like by the 13th, the end of the 13th, you can turn it off. Okay. If I have concern or any questions, I will contact you via Canvas message or email. Um, so in the controller virtual machine, we want to automate the authentication process for using SSH. We've done that at the beginning. So you simply would write a script and you can use pexpect or some of the libraries that you have learned in order to be able to test to be able to automate the SSH process. So remember that we have to copy the RSA files, and so set that up, copy the RSA files, and then be able to test your script. So it should allow connect, and if you have any questions or any concern, if you run into any problem, make sure that you contact me or let me know, address that throughout from now until it's due. So now when you test it, I need you to give me the screen captures so that way I can see that you've done it. Okay. And then through the test process, I will be also able to check, and that's 20 points. Um, we would need to do a playbook. So make sure that you enable Ansible, install Ansible on your controller machine and also on your client machine. And then you need to write a playbook. And we've done several playbooks. So you can go back to the lab and take a look at how you automate the playbook um, to create files. And it doesn't matter with me what kind of files you create. You can do like 3 text files, a few text files, or a certain type of files that you want. Okay. And again, we wanted to include the screen capture, and also we wanted to test that. Okay. Um, for Python Scapy, we've done this and I illustrated it in Windows environment, but you can still use Linux virtual machines to be able to do this. So you can enable Python's Scapy, install it, and then be able to use it. You don't have to craft the packets, but I want to see if you understand how to use Scapy commands and be able to um, monitor the client system. So look at the IP address for your virtual machine for the Linux system and be able to make sure that you can see and monitor like ping packets, HTTP packets, etc. Okay, we've done the exercise in detail with that. Okay, so when you get into Scapy, it's pretty much the same. The beginning process for using Windows and Linux Scapy is a little bit different. But other than that, once you get in, it's pretty much the same. Okay, so that will be 20 points. And then you will need to create a graph in GraphViz, and you can use any of the format. You can use dot, nito, circle, whatever you like. I need you to give me the script file that you created. And you can be fancy using shape, or you can use the default one. I didn't really have specific requirement there. I just want to see if you're able to graph it in GraphViz. And so I need the script file for GraphViz, and then I need you to give me the output file. So when you generate the output file, it can be the image file in PNG, PDF, etc. So we have done some practice with this, and I want you to create a graph for your cloud virtual network. If you look at only the two virtual machines for that particular network, then you can graph it that way, or you wanted to graph it for your entire cloud network as you might have other virtual machines enabled. So I'm fine with either way. I just want to make sure that you know how to graph it to illustrate the connectivity of your nodes or your virtual machines that would be tied to the cloud infrastructure. Okay, so that will be 20 points. And then I want you to use HTTPI to manage your web services on the controller virtual machines. And we've done some HTTPI exercise where we look at the HTTP GET and requests and how we can set certain things using HTTPI, so you can test that on your controller virtual machine and be able to do that. So make sure that we bring in the package and be able to launch that on your controller virtual machine. And if you wanted to test it with the client, right, you can see how you can enable the HTTPI option on the client and then control the clients on how it would set and get HTTP. So that will be 20 points. We worked on using Flash SQL Alchemy, using Python script. We did some simple tasks, and then I have a lab for you to create the actual database. So I want you to use your controller virtual machine to create a database, and you don't have to have a lot of the user accounts. You can test it with a couple user accounts. So I want you to create the user account database, like username and some information about that user. And for that, you would need to provide your script file and also show me the screen capture that you have launched the script file and be able to accomplish your script successfully with Flash SQL Alchemy. Okay, so that will be 20 points. So with this project, it really ties in some of the administrative components using some automation process, using some of the tools that we've learned to look at network administration, system administration, components using cloud environment. Now, when you submit, since you have various files, you can organize everything into one folder. You can zip it and then you can upload it. So when I download, everything will be in the same folder. That way I can look through, and that would streamline the process for me. And when I finish, I will send an announcement to let you know that your grades are ready and everything is ready, and you can turn off your virtual machines or deallocate your virtual machines accordingly so it stopped charging, or you can even delete it at some point. So I like for you to put everything into a zip folder because we would have script files, screen captures, your account information, your documents, anything that needs to be submitted needs to go there for part one. Okay. Any questions? Some of the things I left out is the visualization option, like graphing and all of that. But if you play around with AWS and Azure, there's visualization data analysis component that's built into the cloud. So I felt that it would be unnecessary to write a script in order to visualize it when you already have the visualization tool that's built into the cloud platform. Um, and it's more advanced than what we would be able to achieve with our simple script. So that's some of the things I had left out for this particular project. Okay. And we're going to touch on visualization today when we talk about ELK. So any question with part one? Okay. In the second part, very similar to all your other project in my class, once you finish your project, I like for you to do a self-evaluation Okay. I didn't link it into this particular document, but you will find it in the part 2 assignment. There's a link, then you would be able to click it, and then it will take you to the Google form. You just have to answer the questions on how you've done on the project, what kind of challenges you come across, what lesson have you learned. So that way we can, number one, I can assess you based on, how you've done, also in reading your feedback. And then number two, you can use that to really document and say, okay, this is some of the things that I want to further explore. This is some of the skill that I need in order for a project like this to be successful. Okay. And then we want to include that on your ePortfolio. Suggested that you should add a tab for each of the project that you've done in all subjects. So if you've done something in other classes, like for your IoT class, you should be able to add that on there. It is your portfolio that you can keep, and you can showcase your work, and you can link it with your LinkedIn, so that way people can see your project. Now, if you have GitHub, you can include the link for your GitHub repo, okay, or any of the forks that you had incorporated. Make sure, this is a thing that I run into a lot, okay, in all classes, because your ePortfolio is tied to your drive, your Google Drive. And if you don't enable share, you can share the main ePortfolio, and I can see your ePortfolio, but there's certain tabs. So each of the tab that you create, you have to enable the share for that publicly. Otherwise, people can only see your main portfolio and not the other tabs. Google implement explicit permission for the reason of security. So make sure that we would test it. And the way that you can test it is to open up your portfolio in another browser, because there's no cookie safe, because if you open it in the regular browser that you use to create the ePortfolio, it would just take you to the your ePortfolio. So you can open up Edge, Firefox if you're using Chrome, and then test it with your URL. So when you submit, I did enable this and I double check it. So there is a URL tab, and I will show you what that is when you click submit. You need to include the URL. And if for some reason you can't find it, then I also enable text editor portion, so you can paste it in there, or you can attach a document that has your URL, but I will show you that now. Okay. So for the part 2, that will be 50 points, 25 for each portion of part 2. Okay. So here is part 1, and I just specifically identify some of the criteria here again. And then there is, oh, I thought I added the rubric for this, but maybe I didn't save it. You will see the rubric, which will contain each of these portions. Okay. And then I will use the rubric for grading. Then for the second part, I had a rubric for this, but here is your part 2. Okay. Let me go switch it real quick to the student view so I can show you how you can submit your URL. Stream today, disable this. 1 second. I'm going to change my setting real quick, okay? Give me 1 second. Okay, so this is the student view. And if I need to submit my part two of the project, okay, because you already know how to attach stuff for part one, then I just click start assignment. You notice that here there are these tabs, okay? It allows you, so I enable like Google Drive, Dropbox options in the case that students can share their stuff through the Google Drive or their Dropbox. I don't really use Studio, so that's default there. But here's your website URL, right? Because normally file upload is here, and then you would see the website URL, and then you just need to paste that in here, and then you can add a comment, and then you click submit. Now with the text entry, if you use a text entry portion, you just type that in here, okay, and so on. So you would then, for part two, you would need to um, put in your URL here and then upload the screen capture of your completed screen of your survey for the course project evaluation. Okay. And then I would use this rubric to grade. Any question? Okay, no questions. All right, with that said, then we can take a look at our project. I have no lab this week for you, so please use the lab time to work on your project, and there will not be any lab after starting with this week until the end. Okay. Um, I thought about putting in the lab for this week, but um, I prefer that you would spend time on your project as you would have about a month left to work on it. Okay, so let's talk about the notes for Unit 12, and then I will post the video for the lecture in case you need to go back and complete the assignments. This assignment is going to be due on May 14th, so it's more toward the end of the week instead of in the next couple of days. Okay, I will be available on Wednesday on Zoom, our regular class session. In case you have questions, you can pop in. And then I will be available subsequently at 4:30 for for my regular office hours, and then I teach another class at 6 o'clock. Okay, so in the notes for this week, if you check it out, in this week, the author introduces Elastic Cloud, and this is really geared to search and analyze other cloud environment. You now, if you use this product, it has a trial version, and then or if your company purchased the product, you should be able to incorporate more features and tools. But you can take a look at their options in the packages. So the product information is here. Let me come back to Elasticsearch and some of the things. So when you sign up for the account, which I did for the trial version, it's going to be the basic instead of the enterprise, but it does ask you which options do you want. Okay. And so when you select, the first option, it's going to give you in general some of the tools. But if you select Elasticsearch, it's going to be really geared for that. So when you sign up, if you're not sure, you can just sign up for the regular EOK stack, and then you can incorporate some of the components. Now, in 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 this, there are three main parts. There are more features and services in ELK than these three, but we're going to focus on these three as it would be the core components on how we would be able to evaluate logs, graph it, or visualize it. So how are we going to be able to obtain data, analyze the data, and visualize the data? Okay, and that's the whole point in this particular chapter. So there are three sub projects under ELK, and ELK stand for Elasticity Stack. So you have the Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. So, and each one of these would have its own functionality. So for the Elasticsearch, it is used to search and be able to get analytics for certain things like Azure. If you wanted to look at, your region, your AZs, your instance information, you can search through it. So you're using a tool that is cloud-based to connect with another cloud platform to analyze the destination or the targeted cloud platform. Okay. And so Logstash, this is a way that you can ingest data. So that means that you can bring in data. And because in IT and cybersecurity, we deal with a lot of logs. And a lot of these logs exist on our cloud servers. So we wanted to be able to bring that in so that way it can ingest the data from different sources, and it would then um, transform it in the way they say transform really is to be able to allow us to set up on how we want certain details in certain data, or we want to filter out some of the things that we don't need from that data, and so that way we can perform search easily. Okay. And you can bring in the file and configure it, and so that way when you're searching for a certain thing it can give you the right output. And then also having the index from the data that it would be incorporated, we can use Kibana to visualize and chart and graph for reporting purposes. Okay. So and Elastic Stack, the stack term really means that it has different type of projects combined to give you the data collection in network, storage, cloud performance, security events, etc. And it's going to allow you to also store these things and be able to retrieve it, archive it for later use, and have an understanding through the analytics and the visualization of your network performance, or events, anomalies, etc. Okay, so here it talks about Elastic Stack and its benefits, and as you can see, I will show you how it look like. So when you use it, you can, and I use this for my East US2 cloud area through Azure. So what you can do is you can organize your deployment. You can search for a specific area of your instance or all your instances, and you would use like API and console to really manage it. And then we can look at Kibana on how we would be able to um, have some kind of understanding in our, and I didn't have anything graphed yet, but I have the instance that's already put in. So I brought it in through using the Azure. Um, I enable one of my Azure virtual machines and I wanted to analyze it. So you can use this to be able to analyze your cloud environment. And then, so there are additional um, features that comes along with this, along with security, where you can change this, you can manage passwords, you can have traffic filter, and so on. Okay, so you can also set that up, and then you can have like for the performance analysis area too. So you can look at like how your CPU would be, the request. And this is very useful when you enable DNS and web servers and database on your cloud environment, because it actually gives you things like hits on your website when you're hosting, you know, file transfers, stuff like that. Like you can set that up, but this is the default just for my virtual machine or my server performance. Okay. Any questions? And it's very easy to use. Okay. So, and the author, Eric Cho, actually started with just setting up a network environment where he used Cisco devices, and those devices would then be providing, he's going to pull logs from these devices, and then he's going to use the ELK server to really manage those logs, and evaluate those logs. So that's the whole topology infrastructure that would be used. Um, then, so here it talks about how you would be able to use Elasticsearch. And keep in mind that this is memory intensive, but it doesn't require too much storage or CPU. So you're only going to need like one virtual CPU, and then we only need about 4 gigs. And I think through the trial version, it would give you this option. Okay. And then you would need approximately 2 GB for your network storage, to kind of just to use it as a way that you would store some data information for your cloud environment or your network systems. Okay. All right. So in the first question, it asks you to visit installing Elastic Stack information, and you can take a look at the type of products. So when you visit this site, it's going to give you the details in how you should install. Okay. So you want to refer to their documentations. So here it shows you that you can have the versions, but it needs to be installed in order because they're designed to be used in sequentially. Okay. Now, if you do the upgrade, then it's going to be compatible, but then the upgrades is going to give you the additional options in the enterprise area. So the first thing that you need to install is going to be Elasticsearch. Okay, and that they include the installation information here. So if you click this, it's going to take you to Elasticsearch information and how you would install it on various operating systems. Now the Windows environment is pretty easy. As I'm using Windows 10, you just download the zip file and then you unzip it, okay? And then you would need to set up your environment variables. We've done that in the past for several packages. So, and you need to set up your system environment variable to have the path of where the bin folder, the bin directory in that unzipped folder for Elasticsearch. Okay, so it's gonna look like this. So I downloaded these, and it would come down as a zip file like this. And then I use 7-zip, so I just extract it, or you can use the operating system tool. And so you would have a folder like this, okay, after it unzip. Okay, so that's the parent directory. And inside it, in the child directory, you would have Elasticsearch 7.12.1 for the version. And here's the bin folder. So what I did was I simply open this up, I copy this folder, and then I transfer it to my C drive. Okay, so you can see that here. And then I open this up and I copy this path. And then I go to environment variables. Sorry. And I just set this up using creating a new environment variable. Okay. And in the instructions, if you click on the instructions, it talks about how you should set up your your home directory for Elasticsearch, and how you should name it. And then I paste the link, the path here. So what does it look like? I did one for Kibana. It will look like this. So what I'm telling the system is when you're using the percentage symbol like this, it's saying same as ES, which is Elasticsearch home. So I'm saying that this is where my home folder for, or my home directory for Elasticsearch would be. Find it in C, Elasticsearch 7.2, 12.1 bin directory. And with that, when you look at it, right, you would see the files that's needed, the Windows batch file, and the things that are needed to be able to execute right after you install Elasticsearch. Now, why do we need to install it if we have something um, something like this to use, right? The whole point in some of the things that we've been doing with cloud is that we wanted to be able to write script, and we wanted to use the install packages to be able to automate this for us. What if you just wanted to write script and run it for thousands and hundreds of systems instead of, clicking and changing the configuration for each of the actual virtual machines and so on, for your cloud environment. So we can automate it using Python script and the install packages, from the search area to, the visualization area and how it would ingest data. Okay. So now, where do you really see this, right? You would see like network analyst people that would use this type of tool, or cloud analyst people, especially when we're dealing with IaaS, infrastructure as a service, not just network administrators. So this will benefit that portion in the discipline on how, the skill sets for, the network, the IT discipline, to really expand the capability of how we manage our cloud. Okay, so in the first question, I simply would list the products, and I need to install these in order. Keep that in mind. So you would first install Elasticsearch, then you would install Kibana, then you would install Logstash, then you would install Beats, then you would install APM server, and then lastly you would install Elasticsearch Hadoop. And Hadoop, the way that we can use this is to work with the framework, so that way if you're running like Apache Hadoop, um, to be able to manage your database of all your logs information, it has that particular component for the service. Okay. Any question with one? So as you see, when you look at the documentation, um, they rely on each other. These components, the individual sub projects, they rely on each other. So they don't work as standalone. So in order to search, you have to have like beats. okay, set up with indices. And in order to graph, you have to have like some of the search filter set and also indices set in Kibana and Beats. So um, you will see throughout the notes that it talks about how these are intertwining and how you would use them together. Okay. Any question with one? So here it touches on Elasticsearch. This is built with Java, okay? And because it's built with Java, we want to make sure that we have the Java packages in order for it to work as, as a tool. So what we want in here, it talks about how you would need to, when you download that, you should also download your Java package. And importantly, you want to first set up your virtual memory settings for Elasticsearch. Okay. So the way that this is shown is that you would configure the size of your virtual memory settings or the size of your virtual memory. And so in Linux, you would use the command sysctl, and then this allow us to configure the map of the memory for the virtual memory. Okay. And the way it's also illustrated is it's important that you set up a configuration file. To really streamline the automation process, configuration file is important, and configuration file can do what? It can hold host information, addresses, port information, and you've seen this before when we work with Ansible, where you would need to set up your YAML file and to be able to, because all of it needs to extract all the configuration from this file in order for that script to be successful. So it's going to plug all of the details in from that particular configuration file. So when you write your script, you need to make sure that that configuration file would have the essential details for your script. Okay. Okay. So here, what they're showing is that when you run Elasticsearch with that configuration file, it's gonna pull the information for the HTTP GET request in the example. Okay. And so what we want to do with this is just like how you would search on the internet, right? We can start filtering down and narrowing down on specific items that we want to focus on. So sometime if you have a very large scope, you're going to get a lot of data. The whole point in this is to really transform your data and clean it up so that way it makes sense to you. Okay. And that's part of the analytics part, is to make sure that the data have relevance and it would be able to help us solve some kind of problem. So in the, okay, questions. So Michelle put HTTP, JSON dumps, Flash dumps are all pretty much JSON. Okay. Or the dictionary format. So it is in JSON, but the way it's going to present, most of your data is going to be presented in dictionary format. The reason for that is that because you would have the key that would tie with the data field, so it's easier to index using the key to identify the data field. And you would see that all across whatever type of data that you would look. Okay, especially with JSON. So you would see it as the dictionary format. Okay, and any other questions? Okay, so as we look at the Elasticsearch, so if you go visit the page, that's what I showed you earlier. Here it talks about Elasticsearch. It is a distributed search and analytics engine, right? This is what you would start with. And when you work with Logstash and Beats, it really, those two are designed to collect, aggregate, and ingest data. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that we use those tools to bring in the data, okay, so that way we can store it for searching purposes. Kibana is then allowing us to visualize and report our data. Okay, so it allows you to manage it, look at it, chart it, show it on your report. So in Elasticsearch, we would index and we would be able to search it, and then we would be able to bring that into Kibana for graphing, charting. So it is a way that we can search and analyze all type of data. Okay, the way that we use it in this class is for networking and infrastructure purposes, but you can use it for other type of data, whether it's structured or unstructured. Okay, and if you explore a little bit about Hadoop, right? And so it will be able to work with SQL, NoSQL, MongoDB, etc. This tool, okay? You can look at text, numerical data, geospatial data. So beyond just our class, if you're looking at geospatial data or overall data analytics, this is helpful. Okay, and it's store and index so that way it would support fast searches. Okay. So as you would have larger data down the line, it would allow you to scale, right, and expand. So for number 2, it asks you to take a look at what is Elasticsearch page and describe the functionality of Elasticsearch. So I highlighted some of the things in that section. I put down that Elasticsearch is a distributed search and analytics engine, which is the heart of Elastic Stack. Logstash and Beats facilitate collecting, aggregating, and enriching data and storing it in Elasticsearch server. It provides near real-time search and analytics for all types of data. And it's able to work with structured or unstructured text, numerical data, or geospatial data. It can efficiently store and index for fast searches. Any question on Elasticsearch? Again, you can find these details on the actual web page. Okay, so I just highlighted the section where it talks about Elasticsearch functionality. And as we covered earlier about when you first, before you run Elasticsearch, you need to set up your virtual memory. Okay. And for question 3, it asks you, why should you configure virtual memory before using Elasticsearch? Because it uses mmapfs directory to store its indices. So the default operating system limits the mmap count are likely to be too low, which may result in out of memory exception. So it will cause error. So we wanted to set it up so that way it can properly store the indices in the region of the memory where we can access it ultimately. Questions? And this answer comes from your notes, and also if you look at the virtual memory configuration documentation that they provided, there's a link in your notes. It talks about that. So before we even configure, we have to install Elasticsearch. And then after we install Elasticsearch, we wanted to be able to use it. And then we also need to install Kibana. So for question 4, it asks you, how do you install Elasticsearch and Kibana on your system? Okay. I put down the Windows stuff, but you're welcome to include whatever type of system that you have, right? The process for that. So, but ultimately, if you're using, whether terminal or the actual downloadable and then go through the installation, the process, you need to download it. Okay. So you need to download Elasticsearch, and the website for that, you can just Google it, but here's the link. It's going to take you to this page, and you would have variations of packages for different OS. So you would choose the one that you wanted to use, like Debian Arch, right? 32-bit Debian, RPM, your Linux 64-bit, Windows. And then here it talks about the package managers. So you can use Yum, DNF, or if you're using like Raspberry Pi, you can do apt-get. And then for Mac OS, you would do Homebrew. And if you're not sure, right, go back to earlier how here is getting started. It gives you the link for the download. If you click this, it takes you to the documentation. And here it talks about how to go through and even run it, how to index module, how to map it, how to do text analysis, and so on. Okay. And then if you use Docker, you can also look at this here. So earlier we looked at this page, right? And then if you go to Quick Start, it shows you how you can set up your deployment step by step, how to search your data. So this is, and I think there's some portion of it you can find a video tutorial too on their guide. So it walks you through on how does all the steps on how to run it, how to send requests, how to add data, search, and clean up. So let's go back, right? So I put down that we would download Elasticsearch, use installer package as indicated on the page to install Elasticsearch. For Windows, you need to set up your system environment variable path. And basically we have to unzip the folder, right? And then copy the folder to our C drive, make sure that we set up the path where it shows the bin directory inside the parent folder. After you install Elasticsearch, then you can download Kibana package as a zip folder, use installer to install Kibana, very similar to what you've seen with Elasticsearch. So for Windows, you download the zip package, the zip folder, unzip it, copy it to C drive, set up environment variable, and there you go. Now, if you use like Python virtual environment, okay, you can use curl and then be able to bring in your Elasticsearch and then Kibana package as well. Okay, so the instruction in the book, he illustrates on how to use Linux, and then their portion of it, it shows you how you can also pull it from pip. So in Python already, you would then do the pip install. If you're outside of Python, right, you would then need to pull down the zip directory and then unzip it. So I'll open this page so you can see. And here it walks you through on how to do the install. And here it talks about the installer for your package. Okay. And there's some feature with security for Kibana, right? Securing access to Kibana and so on. So after you install, because here it walks you through on how to do the setup for various OS and platforms. So you would then configure it and then you can run it. Any question with 4? Okay, so here in the notes, starting with page 3, it shows you how you can configure. And notice that here he's using a YAML file. Anytime we deal with configuration file, you can write the YAML file. And we would specify the port, the host, IP, the name, okay? And then for this, that will be the IP address and the port. Then when we start it, we just run the configuration file with Kibana. Okay. So just like what we talked about with Elasticsearch, you would have a configuration file for it where you would specify the information of your target, then you would run it. Okay. And then it would launch like this in the browser, as it needs to show you the interface because it's a visual tool. Then after that, you would add in the data. Okay. So you can specify the type of data that you want to bring in. And then this one does not include Java out of the box, so you need to install Java JDK. And 11 and up is recommended. Okay, I think they're at like what, 16 now? So okay. So when you here, it shows you how this will be software as a service, right? Platform. And for AWS and Azure deployment, um, the lowest is going to be minimum per month. The price can change time to time, but as you can see, it's not that expensive. Okay. And then you can do a try free for a month. So let's talk about the process and how we would use these together, these packages together. So for number 5, it asks you to describe the process of using Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana to create and examine data sets. Refer to end-to-end example. So in the example, it walks you through the process on how to use the packages. So first, you need to export log from Logstash server by configuring listening port, and it uses UDP port 5144. So what we need to do is we need to take the log from the server and we need to bring it into Elasticsearch. Okay. So as we would bring it into Elasticsearch host, we need to configure the file, which is your YAML, and then convert your YAML to CFG, which is the configuration file, in binary. Then with that, we would set up index name and output details. What you want to find or search is that this is where the configuration file is important. Then after that, we would use Kibana to create search index pattern. And the index name must match the Elasticsearch index name. You can use wildcard, which is the asterisk. Then we need to configure index pattern settings. And the way that you would view your selected index is, or your index entry would be in Kibana Discover. So once you have the indices set up in Kibana and see it, then you need to stop the Logstash server on Elasticsearch server, as it would generate storage on the memory. So once you bring that into Kibana, you can stop. Then in the Kibana, after this point, we can then set up how we want it to visualize, right? Once you have the index entry, you can tell it how you want it to see, whether you wanted to put it into a pie chart or some kind of um, line graphs, etc. Any question with 5 with the process of using Elasticsearch? And I did not include the stuff that we mentioned earlier about virtual memory mapping and before you run it. So this is part of running the Elasticsearch already, right? So you configure the listening port, you output the data into Elasticsearch host. With that data, what you can do is you can also create a configuration file on how you want to index the data. And then using Kibana, you can then um, create a search index pattern, so that way you can have index entry, and then you can use the index entry to visualize your data. So here it just shows me the metrics, right? But when you look at Kibana, you can have it restart. But what I did was I specified the instant, this is on their launch portal, but that I wanted to take a look at the Azure. And then you can also, when you bring in the deployment, you can bring in other cloud instances and be able to set that up. Okay. Okay, any question with 5? So when I say refer to the end-to-end example, here is the end-to-end example. It walks you through the steps, right? You put the data into Logstash. So what it's doing is recording logs right here, and then it's gonna be able to export it out to the server. And then you are going to create the configuration from Logstash. So what they did was change directory to Logstash, make a folder where it's going to store the network configuration file, and then create the configuration file as CFG. And in the configuration file, you just specify how the input would be. Okay, so it tells you here that it will be, this is the port, and this is the name, right? The type is, this is for the router. So, and then for the output, you would specify that it's going to be on the Elasticsearch server and the index. Then, so after you have the indices, we want to see the index in Elasticsearch. So in Linux, in the virtual environment, you can do curl and then put in the IP and the port for that target system and open up. So the way that he has it organized is under these folder, okay, or directory. So it's going to give you this output. Now on Kibana, you can set up index pattern. Then after that, you wanted to make sure that you define the index pattern that's going to match with your Elasticsearch. So, and he showed here that because it's event, so it's going to be time-based, and it should automatically pull this for you when you, for the second step, when it configured the settings, it will give you a drop-down menu of what it sees from the pattern that you gave it. And then you can select. So the way that he has it here is it's saw timestamp. So it's going to try to pull that. So he would select this option and then go to the Discover tab, be able to see the entry. Okay. And it will put in the time, the host information, right, for a specific event here, the type of servers, and so on. And then below this, it goes into creating the Python script. And you would use the request because in this case, we're using the HTTP RESTful API. So you need to do the get and request. So here you would import in request module. And then underneath, you would see that you have a definition for the method, and it's going to pull your, you can specify like the HTTP header and then be able to pull it from your index value, which is the key, and have it loop through. So when you run that file, okay, it's going to be able to give you the type of data that can be used, the indices that can be used with Kibana. And then you can do installation of Elasticsearch this way as well. In pip, we talked about that earlier. And when you install it, when in your Python script, you need to import in from Elasticsearch, import Elasticsearch, so you can use that, the member method from that class in the module in order to access the index. Okay. And then after that, it goes into data ingestion with Logstash. And again, we would have to set up the configuration file here for the input, like what you've seen earlier, and then how it would be output. Okay. So as we're proceeding in that area, we're going to go ahead and answer the next question. For question 6, it asks you to describe the purpose of Logstash configuration file in outputting search result from using Elasticsearch. So Logstash, as we talked about earlier, it's really designed to ingest data, bring in data. And we have to set up the configuration file because it provides options for input, filter, and output. Because we wanted to really specify what we're looking for, right? Or at least the type of data that we are going to work with. So how we would have an input, what kind of filter we need to implement, and how we want it output. So in the filter, I put that in particular, the filter section provides a way for us to enhance the data by selectively matching the data and further processing it before outputting it to Elasticsearch. So what you're doing there is you're really cleaning it up before you really bring it into Elasticsearch. And the cleaner it is, the easier it is for you later on. Right? And so you're not wasting resources going through just tons of stuff that you don't need. And we can have it Logstash as the extension. So Logstash would be extended with modules, and each module provides a quick end-to-end solution for ingesting data and visualizations with the purpose-built dashboards. So we can separate them as individual module, and then we can call on those module as needed. That's what it's saying. So the important takeaway from this is that when you work with Logstash, right, and Logstash allows us to bring in the data, then we want to use the configuration file to really set how we want the data to look like. Okay, so that way it will be more applicable when we search through it and when we visualize it. Okay. And sometime, I attended the Women of Data Science event with UCR, and they have a panel where they talk to the data scientists who looked at different types of data for different purposes. And they said that, yeah, you're going to get a lot of stuff that you don't need. And then there's some stuff that you need that you have to look for. Okay, so this allows us to really set up on what we're seeking and how we want it to be presented. Okay, we're almost done. We just have a few more to go. Any questions with 6? Okay, so here it shows you the interface, how the entry would look like. And then I bolded the section about Logstash configuration files. So it jumps out at you from the bottom of 10 going into 11. And you can refer to the documentation. Then in the next section, it talks about elastic beats. So similar to Logstash, this is functioning as what they call a data shipper. It is designed to collect data and output data directly into Elasticsearch or to Logstash for processing. So Elasticsearch is used to process data as we would be able to seek or search through it, and so is Logstash. But a lot of the times when we use Elasticsearch, it uses Logstash, and we can also use beats. So beats allow us to ship in the data, and there are different type of beats. There's file beat, metric beat, packet beat, heartbeat. Okay. So file beat is used to ingest syslog data into Elasticsearch. Okay. So it's designed to be lightweight, single purpose agent. It would be close to the data source. And what it does is it acts as a data collection agent. And we can use it with Apache server to be able to get things like weblog data or other form of data. So if you wanted to do like how many hits you have on the website or the web page and so on, that will be also be useful. So it'll be able to ship the data in, and so that way you can collect, aggregate, and then organize. And in this example that he uses, he used it for Cisco iOS logs. And FileBeat, simply, it is a version of ElasticBeat. It is designed to forward and centralize data. So in the next part for question 7, it asks you to describe the purpose of ElasticBeat in Elasticsearch. You would have Elastic Beats are single purpose data shipper, usually installed as an agent. It collect data on the host and send the output data to Elasticsearch or Logstash for processing. It is a lightweight single purpose agent that is sit close to the data source. It's used to collect, aggregate, and organize data such as weblog data. And as you know that we would have these cloud systems, to host, right? Companies would use cloud services to host websites, to host web services. So we can use tools like this to be able to pull logs, right? Clean it up, evaluate it, and store it. And then question 8 asks you, what is FileBeat in Elasticbeats? It is a version of Elasticbeats software, and it is used for forwarding and centralizing log data. Any question? So we want to explore, right, the packages within ELK and how they're used in the case that if you need to use them, or if you think about, sometime if things come up and you need to have an option on how to evaluate your logs and your data. Okay. Data doesn't have to be logs. It could be other things, but now you have another option. There are a lot of tools for data analytics, and it's great. So it is its own subject area, right? Okay, so for FileBeat and Elasticbeat, you can refer to page 11 in your notes. You can also find this in a textbook. Below that, it talks about the directory layout. Okay, for the home, that will be your FileBeat installation. It's under USR share FileBeat. So this gives you the list of directories so you can quickly find where everything is. Okay, so this is useful. And so here it gives you example on how you can use FileBeat to set up index templates. Okay. And notice that you would use setup command. And you can use it to set up dashboard and index management. So, and Airtrue, he uses Cisco module with FileBeat. So here he enabled the Cisco module. Then he would go and he create a Cisco YAML, which is for the configuration file for those devices. So he can specify how he want the log location to be indicated. Then he starts the FileBeat. So after you had set up this, then you can enable the service by doing start, FileBeat start. Then after that, you will be able to see your syslog information. Okay. So in the next question, question 9, it asks you, after using FileBeat to set up indices of logs, how do you use Elasticsearch to query data from the log? So first you need to set up JSON file for query and filter criteria. Then you would implement script using archparse module. We'll look at that soon. And then you need to construct search by specifying index and filter in the script. After that, you will be able to see the raw data from the log. So this is the simplified step, right? In your notes, it contains the detailed example on how this is done and what the script would look like. I went to the author's GitHub folder. When I downloaded it, I didn't have the chapter 12.py, but I will go back and I'm going to take a look. But if you access Packet T database, if you're using Packet T ebook, you might be able to also find resources through Packet T with the tool or the files, the scripts that he created for the book. Okay. So Packet T. So this example, he uses NetFlow data. Okay. So here he bring in the NetFlow module similar to what you seen with the Cisco. Then he would do a setup. Then he created the YAML, which is the configuration file for NetFlow. And that what it consists of. Okay. It's port, host information. Then use the data input, then visualize it. And then here he shows a table of how that would be, and it can be exported to CSV, which gives you like a spreadsheet-like list, okay, of what you specified in your data filter. Then after that, we would use Elasticsearch to search, okay? And here there is a JSON file for query, and this one simply is just to do match all. So this is what I mentioned earlier with the step. Then you would use the module arch parse, and this would allow us to specify how we want to index for our query. So the input value is specified there. Then here's the body of it. So you would then specify how you wanted to query, what kind of instance, the IP address of that instance, and then how you wanted to look, what you wanted to look for hits, total, and value. Okay. Then you would run those scripts. So throughout the exercises, he would create a file, first configuration file, and then create a script, and then run it, then modify the configuration file, modify the script, rerun it, and so that way he would have multiple results that look different throughout to show you that there are different, the transition in how the data would then be queried. be searched. Okay. So it might seem confusing when you look through it, but ultimately it's just multiple iteration of it um, in with modification like this. See, changing the JSON file and then modifying the script and then run it and then modify the JSON file again. So here in this one, he did it for like a certain period of time on a certain router, and then rerun the query script. So that way you would have different result. Okay. So this is just a summarized version of that. Um, so if you wanted to see the example or the details in that, you can look through that section also in the chapter. I also, remove some of the process in that he would repeat it. So that way you don't have so many of the same things over and over again. Okay. Any question on file B with Elasticsearch query? And then for 10, it asks you, after using FileBeat to create index in Elasticsearch to query the data, sorry, I had a typo here. How do you use Kibana to visualize or chart the data? So in Kibana, you would then need to, it's an interface, right? It's gonna open up the UI, then you are going to select the chart options that you want. Okay. And then you are going to set your index based on your FileBeat search output. So the search for the indices that derive from FileBeat. Then you are going to set up your label for the chart so it makes sense when it charts out. It shows it. And then you would click this play to really start displaying the chart. So in the Kibana section, it gives you the screenshots on how that would be achieved in these steps. Start with selecting the chart options, specifying the indices, then set up your labels. Then once you're happy with what you had set up in the settings of your chart, then you can click play. Okay. So in this right here, it shows your visualization chart options. And then you can find the source, which comes from the FileBeat. Okay. Then you can also search for it if you can't find the things that is displayed here. Then you would customize your label for your graph. Then after that, you would be able to click play at the top. And here it shows you how you can set up your options and how you wanted to show, whether you wanted to show the label or not. You can turn on or off the donut. Okay, which is your pie setting, what your pie would look like, whether you wanted like a ring, like a donut, or you wanted like a solid, pie pieces. Okay, so it would look something like this if you want the pie pieces. or if you wanted like the donut rings. Okay. And you can also set up metric base for different types of systems or all together like this. And then you can download your CSV format, which is from the table. And that shows you the visualization for the stack. Okay. Any question with Kibana, which is usually the last part after you for the analysis portion, right? And then the other two features we didn't include it in this particular lecture because um, it would be used for the extended areas of analysis. So you just need to use the search the for the log and the bringing in the data and then the visualization of the data. Okay. Anything that you miss or any questions? So Michelle said once one could make a simple security platform for home network, or do you need a lot of resources? No, you don't. You can have a security platform for your network. You can even use this to analyze your network, right? Your log information for your network. Um, Depending now, extracting the data from your wireless router at home, you just have to see if they allow that based on the manufacturer. It does generate a log, and depending if it's a lease router, you might have to go back to whoever that you're leasing it from and then ask for the documentation behind it, but you can usually find that and be able to do that. So there are always a handful of manufacturers that create, you know, wireless router for these companies that are using them, like Spectrum, you know, Verizon or Time Warner, or and so on, Cox. So you can find documentation on how to access the syslog file and then be able to extract it and evaluate it. But as far as the security go, you can use it to look at logs for the security. Um, whether there was some form of attempts, um, things like that, or in general for performance reasons. Okay, so that would be a good practice, I think. Outside of what we talked about in the cloud environment, you can practice it using your home network. And if you're successful there, then you have a small sample of what you would scale out to be like a small business network and then eventually enterprise network. Okay. All right. That's it for me today. Again, don't forget that Wednesday I'm going to be on Zoom if you have questions about your project or assignments. Um, but it's not mandatory that you attend Zoom. I will turn it on and I will sit there and I work on other things, but I will wait, and if somebody pop in, we can chat. And it will not be recorded. If it, I will turn off the recorder option and it will not be shared publicly. So if you have questions, you can bring it. You run into challenges, you can bring it. So we will do that for every Wednesday. But on next Monday, I will start going through the final review, and I hope to hit it in a couple of weeks. So that way you will have week 15 just to wrap up your studies and your project and so on. And then week 16, I will turn on the final exam, and then you can turn in your project, by the Wednesday, which is, I believe, the 9th. And then so that way you can complete the course. And it went by very quickly. Um, Let me stop recording real quick. But as far